Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today I'm going to be attempting to talk about every single rumored or leaked first-party title with some level of credibility that will be making its way to Nintendo Switch 2 in some form, eventually, supposedly. So yes, take this all with a grain of salt, we are talking about rumors and leaks here. These things have not been officially confirmed. However, I did make sure to compile all these different rumors and leaks from places that have a history of getting things correct. Now I say that, but I should also point out that there is no such thing as any single leaker, journalist, or insider that is always 100% correct. If you are talking about things that have yet to have officially been confirmed, eventually you are going to be wrong. But with all of that said, I do feel that most of the things brought up in this video have a very strong chance of happening. And so I do think it would be a good idea to compile it all into one place so we can have it in mind as we approach the beginning of the Switch 2 generation, which, by the way, on June 5th, that's when it all starts. I am hoping to have reached my goal of 50,000 subscribers, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. But let's now dive into things here. Now, do keep in mind, I am going to be pulling up different articles that show some level of sourcing to everything I'm going to be bringing up here. But some of these different users are not around anymore, like Midori, for example. They wiped themselves from the whole world of Twitter, so we can't find the direct source, but we do have different articles that have kept record of what was said. And yes, all of this will be linked in the description below. So on that note, let's talk about Midori. Midori is someone who is responsible for a variety of different leaks having to do with Sega and Atlus, and even a little bit regarding Nintendo. They provided several codename leaks last year, and half of them has seemingly been confirmed already. One example is U-King-O. U-King-O is the codename for Breath of the Wild Nintendo Switch 2 edition. So we already knew that U-King was the codename for Breath of the Wild, and the O implied that it was going to be some sort of enhanced version for a console with the codename of O, and we since learned that the code name for Switch 2 was Ounce, so it all kind of checks out there. But that was just one of the 8 different code names that have been proven already. There's more. So, for example, we have another where there's this codename of Edward, another Zelda title, and we already knew about the Richard codename, which was for the Link's Awakening remake, which led us to believe that something like Link's Awakening remake would be happening fairly soon, and sure enough, that was confirmed, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, so that part checks out. Now, one of the code names that has yet to have been confirmed really at all, and we're not sure what it is codename Anna. All we know, according to Midori, is that it may be related to Nintendo Switch Sports, because Elsa is the codename for Switch Sports, Elsa and Anna from Frozen. That seems to be the thinking there. So this team is working on a project, and it could be a follow-up to Switch Sports, but some people have brought up the possibility that maybe it could be Drag Drive. That might be the case. I hope it's something else, because Drag Drive seems like a smaller effort, but it may be the case that Drag Drive is this codenamed Anna project. We shall see. Another codename project that was confirmed was the one for Banquet, and this one was interesting because we knew that Super Mario Party from 2018 had the codename of Buffet, so that led us to believe that there would be another Super Mario Party game, and sure enough, that was correct. We got Jamboree, which leads many to believe that the other codenames likely will also be proven true as well. So we have another that's the codename of Spiral, which is believed to be the next Splatoon game. It would not come as much of a shock if Splatoon is not too far off. But another is Project Legacy, which apparently is being made by Monolith Soft. Now this one to me is quite fascinating, because we know that Monolith Soft was hiring for a new IP throughout the entire Switch generation basically, and it wasn't until last year that they finally take down their hiring for this project. Now from the hiring pages, we're led to believe that this game has some sort of fantasy medieval setting with both action and online elements, and given the history of Monolith Soft and making big massive adventures, it sounds very exciting. And there are these pieces of art we've seen there, but these pieces of art don't necessarily represent what the game will actually look like when it finally comes out, if it ever comes out. But the fact that we also have this codename leak that seemingly supports it makes a lot of sense. Some people have tried to argue that maybe this is like a codename for another Monolith Soft project like Xenoblade Chronicles X, but we already know the naming scheme for all the different code names of the Xenoblade games. They usually have something to do with Titan or Little Folk or Space Folk having to do with Xenoblade X, and Project Legacy has a completely different naming scheme there, so this is likely the new IP. When will it come out? We are not sure. However, it does seem like, with all these other codename leaks, that they were meant to be things that aren't too far off. So we've had about half of them come out already. Perhaps this other one is not so far off either. Maybe it's announced for this year, maybe it's announced for next year. I would not be surprised. Now, 2 more codenames that were brought up were SP Red and Silver Star. I believe Silver Star is actually Donkey Kong Bonanza. Why? Because Donkey Kong Bonanza appears to be made by at least some piece of the Mario Odyssey team when you look at the mechanics, the UI and all, very similar to Mario Odyssey. And Project Red Star was actually the codename for Mario Odyssey. Red is always used for the different mainline Mario adventure games, and Star was pertaining to the Odyssey part of that project. So a Silver Star would be a different style of Odyssey game, and I theorize that Silver would have to do with Donkey Kong, because Donkey Kong is a gorilla. You have those silver grayback gorillas. You also have the silver super Donkey Kong. And so that's been my theory since last year, and seemingly it's been proven true. Now with SP Red, this one's a little bit more debatable. There's been some conversation about this codename having to do something with the Nintendo Museum, but I haven't found any sourcing on that. What we do understand is that whenever Red is used, this is for mainline Mario projects, and SP leads me to believe special, so something big or super powered, like a super powered big new Mario game for Nintendo Switch 2. But given the existence of Donkey Kong Bonanza, some people are skeptical that a new 3D Mario could be coming out anytime soon. Which brings me to another industry insider, and that's Andy Robinson, because Andy Robinson a while back took part in a podcast and talked about the rumored specs of the console and also the launch title of the console back then, 2023. What was being heard is that it would have been 3D Mario, and as you see here in this article, backed by 3 to 4 sources, that seems like a lot. Now, what's hilarious about this is that fast forward a couple years almost, we know that the launch title is not 3D Mario, but Mario Kart World. Now, that was a while back. Plans can change, but it raises the question, what is going on with 3D Mario? Is it possible that these inside sources heard that the Odyssey team was working on something and they assumed it was 3D Mario? Or did perhaps they hear about some sort of big Mario title being available day one and they assumed it would be 3D Mario and it was actually Mario Kart World? These are possibilities. Regardless, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Nintendo is absolutely working on the next Mario game. Historically speaking, they always have 3D Mario available within the first year or two, so I don't doubt that the next 3D Mario is not too far off. Mario's 40th anniversary is later this year. The next Mario movie comes out early next year. I would be shocked if Nintendo doesn't have a big Mario game at the ready relatively soon. Just keep this in mind. We weren't sure about what was going on with Donkey Kong. We believed there would be some sort of 3D Donkey Kong game eventually, but I was skeptical we would see it in the April Direct, but it still made sense for something major Donkey Kong to happen relatively soon because of the Donkey Kong expansion opening in May. And sure enough, in the Direct, Nintendo announced Donkey Kong Bonanza to come out soon after, in July. So I would not be surprised if as we approach the Mario's 40th anniversary or the movie early next year, we do finally get an announcement for 3D Mario. Now, continuing the discussion on Andy Robinson years ago in the thick of the Switch era talked about how Windwaker and Twilight Princess would be coming to Nintendo Switch. These have not come to Nintendo Switch. And he did eventually delete that post, and he had said, update on this for everyone who's now flooding my mentions. Predicting dates is a fool's game. I should have never used 100% in the original tweet. Zelda fans, sit tight. And sit tight we have for many years, and they still have not happened. And so it's gotten to the point where we're thinking, well, maybe they'll come to Nintendo Switch 2. And something that has been confirmed is Wind Waker will be available day one through the GameCube app on Nintendo Switch 2. So in some form, we've gotten an HD version of Wind Waker on Switch 2. But what does that mean for an adapted version of Wind Waker HD from the Wii U as well as Twilight Princess HD? Well, recently there was an interview between Tim Geddes from Kinda Funny and Nate Bildorf from Nintendo, and he said that a game being added to the Nintendo Switch Online library doesn't necessarily prevent a remaster from being released in the future. And this is true, we've seen some examples of this. However, I do think with Wind Waker being added now, it means that if we are going to get a Wind Waker HD, it would be, or a Wind Waker 4K at this point, it would be years down the road. But what about Twilight Princess? What's going on with that? It may be the case that Nintendo was considering doing a Wind Waker or Twilight Princess HD for Switch, but as time progressed, they steered in a different direction. Maybe they decided they wanted to have Wind Waker involved with GameCube NSO early on, and for Twilight Princess, perhaps they want that to be a later update, or maybe Nintendo has a big remake plan for Twilight Princess eventually, which would be a bigger, more ambitious effort. Perhaps it would look something like that tech demo we saw so many years ago for Wii U. But since we're talking about Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD remasters that were rumored for so many years throughout the Switch era, let's talk about a couple more. Metroid Prime 2 and 3. According to Jeff Grubb, Metroid Prime 2 a couple years ago was supposed to come soonish. This is back in 2023, hasn't happened yet. Now, Jeff Grubb was correct about Metroid Prime Remastered. He said there would be a big boy remaster of Metroid Prime 1, and that did happen. The timing was slightly off by a few months, but he was fairly close. And as a part of this same podcast, he did also say that something Zelda related would be happening later on in the year that had nothing to do with Tears of the Kingdom. And later that year, what did Nintendo do? They confirmed that they are working on a live-action Zelda movie. So Jeff Grubb, in my opinion, still has good sources, but when it comes to the Metroid Prime 2 situation and 3, well, clearly it's been messy, and more recently, Jeff Grubb and others like Nate the Hate have suggested that we won't see Metroid Prime 2 or 3 until they come out for Nintendo Switch Online. Which I think is interesting to bring up, because not only did we see Wind Waker on the Switch Online app, but also F-Zero, which has also been rumored by Nate the Hate. And I do think the inclusion of F-Zero GX and Wind Waker mean that we are not going to see these anytime soon remastered. As for Metroid Prime 2 and 3, personally, I think we should wait until Metroid Prime 4 comes out. If Metroid Prime 4 comes out, and we still don't see Metroid Prime 2 or 3, then we can have a conversation in terms of when we might see them again. I do find it curious that Prime 2 was not a part of the initial slate of games that were teased for GameCube on NSO. It is one of the better GameCube games, and it just wasn't there. Neither was Metroid Prime, of course we have remastered. So maybe there still is a plan for Prime 2 and 3, and we just gotta sit tight. But going back to things said by Nate the Hate has talked about two rumors that we're still sort of waiting to see what's going on with them. One of them is Fire Emblem Genealogy: The Holy War, this remake we've been waiting for some time already. It's been rumored for a little while, and we don't know what's going on with it. Supposedly it was coming to Switch. It's anticipated this would be a remake on the level of something like Three Houses, for example, so for people who did not experience the initial story way back when, this might look and feel like basically a totally new game. And even if you played it way back when, with all the modern quality of life enhancements and gameplay changes and visuals, it's still sure to feel like a very fresh experience. When might this be announced? We are not sure. Hasn't been announced yet. At this point, though, I would say that it may be one of those last big Switch 1 games that would also have a Nintendo Switch 2 edition. Having mouse controls to sort of aim around where we want our different units to go might work really well. Now, another rumor from Nate the Hate is Kirby Planet Robobot. Supposedly, it was meant to come to Switch this year of 2025, but recently we've gotten confirmation that we are getting Kirby Air Riders and Kirby and the Forgotten Land plus Star-Crossed World Nintendo Switch 2 edition. That's a lot of Kirby, so it's kind of hard for you to believe that we would also get Planet Robobot this year. However, Kirby Air Riders and Forgotten Land plus Star-Crossed World are Switch 2 entries, and Nintendo may still want to have some Switch 1 games come out to support the Switch 1 audience, so Planet Robobot could still perhaps come out this year, and Nintendo could still have some sort of Switch 2 update for this. I'm not going to say this one would have a full-on Switch 2 edition. Maybe it's just one of those games that gets like a free performance and resolution improvement, and like 90% of all other Switch games will be able to play on Switch 2 thanks to backwards compatibility, of course. Speaking of Kirby Air Riders though, Masahiro Sakurai, the creator of Kirby and Smash Bros., did confirm that he is working with Bandai Namco Studios, as he did with Smash Bros. For the last few entries, on Kirby Air Riders. Which is interesting because a while back we did hear that Bandai Namco reportedly cancelled a Nintendo commissioned project. And we had actually been anticipating some sort of Bandai Namco Nintendo project because we had seen different job listings for some sort of 3D action game. Some of those listings including a remastering. There were other listings that didn't mention remastering, so we thought there might be multiple projects, or maybe they changed plans for it to not be a remaster but a brand new game. It's hard to say for sure. And it's also hard to say for sure if this 3D action game that's supposedly being remastered by Bandai Namco is the project that they canceled. Now, with Sakurai working on Kirby Air Riders, it feels like we're not going to be getting a Kid Icarus Uprising remaster anytime soon. Another game that was made by Masahiro Sakurai. However, there was some speculation that this 3D action game that Bandai Namco was working on could maybe be, if not a Kid Icarus game, a Star Fox game, because both Kid Icarus and Star Fox are 3D action games from Nintendo. Now, either way, this project might be cancelled, but of course Bandai Namco does a lot of different Nintendo projects, so there may still be others, and this 3D action game may still be coming, but we are not quite sure what it is, if it is anything. But I do want to say some things on a potential Star Fox title. Because one of the main designers for Star Fox and F-Zero, Takaya Imamura, who's now retired, has said he's holding out hope for a Star Fox movie. He believes it will happen, and what's interesting about this is that about a year or so ago, we had actually heard that there is a Star Fox movie project in the works, according to V-Scooper, who has apparently gotten some different things correct. Now, I do want to stress that I do not follow movie news nearly as much, so I can't speak to the credibility of V-Scooper as I can, like all these different Nintendo video game insiders. So still take this with a grain of salt, but it is interesting to think about the possibility of a Star Fox movie being in the works. Because if Nintendo does have a plan to have a Star Fox show or movie at some point, and they're working on it, I think that does come with the implication that there's also a game in the works as well. And perhaps similar to Donkey Kong Bonanza, this would be more than just a remastering, but a brand new project. Now, maybe Nintendo might want to get out a Star Fox remaster first, maybe like a remaster of Star Fox Assault or Star Fox Adventures, and then they put out the new game, similar to how we got Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, and then they announced Donkey Kong Bonanza. It's definitely possible, and I do not think Nintendo has given up on Star Fox, so we just gotta be patient here. I'm sure eventually we will see Star Fox, and on that note, I will also say, I'm sure eventually we will also see F-Zero. Now, going to another journalist who has some inside sources is PH Brazil. He had talked about there being one more big final game for Switch 1, and we're not quite sure what it is. It hasn't been announced yet. Some people thought it might be a totally new game, as he says here. It may be a final big game and a new game to a niche beloved franchise. However, it should be pointed out that he also considers remakes to be new games. He did say it's not a remaster, but it might be a big remake. Similar to the rumored Fire Emblem remake, whatever this is, I assume it will have a Switch 2 edition if it is a significant big game. But I also think it's worth noting that this big game that would be a new entry to a beloved niche franchise might be Fire Emblem, so it could be the same thing as the Fire Emblem remake rumor. It's also possible that this somewhat big entry to a beloved niche franchise has already been announced. We've recently got announcements for Rhythm Heaven and Tomodachi Life. It would not surprise me if Tomodachi Life is one of those games that gets a free resolution and performance enhancement on Switch 2. But let's now move on to a leaker who has provided a lot of different rumors or leaks for different Nintendo titles, and this is Nash Weedle. Now, the thing about Nash Weedle, perhaps people don't take him as seriously as others, but I would say Nash Weedle might have a more significant record of getting things correct than PH Brazil. Now, Nash Weedle says a lot more, so they have more shots out there, sure, but recently they have gotten some pretty big things correct, including Donkey Kong Bonanza, Elden Ring Special Edition, and apparently also Assassin's Creed, all coming to Switch 2. And these are just recent things. Nash Weedle's gotten other things correct in the past, of course. Like many others, they've gotten some things wrong as well. But they've talked about a lot of different things coming to Nintendo Switch 2, such as this apparent Pikmin spin-off series that's supposed to come with a new type of gameplay and a different art style. When might that be announced? We're not sure. He did say it would be announced or launched in the next fiscal year, and this was actually said last year almost, so if there's going to be some sort of surprise Switch 1 title, he said it would happen in this current fiscal year. There's still plenty of time for something like that to be announced, but it hasn't happened yet, so we shall see. Now, another big title that Nashville's talked about is Animal Crossing. Some game concepts he's talked about here, You'll be able to move around by controlling vehicles. There will be big city with skyscrapers. There will be adventure missions, puzzles, and minigames, a more collaborative multiplayer, and this is aimed for a 2026 release, which I think would be awesome. That sounds like some great additions to Animal Crossing for me, so I hope Nashville is correct here. Again, we shall see. Now, some rumors that I'm kind of skeptical of, Nashville is saying that Metroid Prime 5 is already in the works and they're aiming for a 2027 release. That seems way too soon. Prime 4 hasn't even come out yet. This is 2025. I doubt they would have a 2-year turnaround here. Now, maybe they can get things out quicker because they already have an established engine and assets and such, and they've already gotten used to Switch 2 development thanks to the Switch 2 edition of Prime 4. And maybe internally they have a target release time of 2027, but that's not actually going to pan out, and the game ends up coming out 2028 or 2029. That seems a bit more believable to me. So I don't doubt that a Metroid Prime 5 is at least in talks at this point as they wrap up things with Prime 4, but I doubt it's coming that soon. Now, another Metroid title that's been teased by Nashville is the next 2D Metroid. Metroid Dread was actually one of the first initial leaks that Nashville had gotten a lot of publicity for, so maybe they have some knowledge on this one. I don't doubt that they are going to do a follow-up to Metroid Dread. Metroid Dread is currently the best-selling Metroid game of all time, so they should definitely follow it up, and the budget for Metroid Dread is certainly a lot lower than Metroid Prime 4, so from a business perspective, if anything, 2D Metroid makes more sense than another Prime game. Of course, I think Prime 4 is going to become an even bigger seller than 2D Metroid, so both are going to make sense. But Nashville has said more. Nashville had also given us some insight as to what may be going on with 3D Mario. He's talked about how with 3D Mario, they may be experimenting with bringing in other Nintendo worlds into the experience. Considering how Sony handled Astrobot, I don't think this is as crazy as some others may believe. Another thing that's been teased by Nashville is another code name for what we presume is a Zelda project. So Richard, Link's Awakening, Edward, Echoes of Wisdom, and now Bernard. Could this have to do with the next 2D Zelda title? Possibly. But it also might be something else. Because Nashville does seem to believe that an Ocarina of Time remake is on the way. Here he says, este año no, this year no, which implies that some other year it may, and a lot of you may be familiar with my theories on there eventually being an Ocarina of Time remake. If we go way back when there were rumors of an Ocarina of Time HD, but even ignoring those rumors, I think there's actually a lot of substantial evidence for Nintendo to remake a Zelda game to come out at some point for the 40th anniversary next year, as they also start to market the Zelda movie to come out early 2027, and I think the best bet is probably Ocarina of Time. I have many videos on that. If you haven't seen them yet, there'll be one in the iCard. So maybe this Bernard codename is the codename for the Ocarina of Time remake. Some might say it's a weird association to make that Bernard might be the codename for Ocarina of Time, and I'm inclined to agree, but I'm simply suggesting it as a possibility. Now, you also see here in this quote tweet or quote post that Nashville is talking about a surprise Nintendo title. What could be this big surprise Nintendo title? I have theorized that there probably will be one surprise Nintendo title, regardless of what rumors are suggesting. Because if you look at Nintendo's current lineup for this year, it feels like there needs to be at least one more Switch 2 exclusive from Nintendo. And my theory is Luigi's Mansion 4. Why? Because Next Level Games, they come with a game every 3 years. They are due. Luigi's Mansion 3 is their best-selling game. Nintendo's going to want to have another big hitter. We are entering Mario's 40th anniversary. The October month seems like the month that might be missing out on a big Nintendo title for this year, and Luigi's Mansion 4 might be a really good fit and a nice appetizer for 3D Mario a little bit later. It is just a theory though. And with all that said, I think I have covered all the different rumors and leaks that have some semblance of credibility. Does not mean they will actually come to fruition. They may. I think most of these will. But what do you all think? How convinced are you of these different rumors and leaks? And is there something else that hasn't rumored or leaked that you would like to see, like perhaps the next Smash Brothers? I have no doubt that Nintendo has a plan for that as well. But let me know what you all think in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.